Thank you very much, Bernd. Welcome, everyone. I hope you had a great start for the Icinga Summit. So I promised Blerim this time I will do a workshop because at the last Icinga camp I was supposed to do a talk, and 1 week before the talk I was like, Blerim, I can't do it. So he was a little sad, and so I do the workshop. And I will do this as long as I don't run out of movie or game titles. So anyway, who has no idea what Icinga for Windows is? Okay, that's great. Who is using Icinga for Windows? That's a few. And who wants to use Icinga for Windows and join this workshop? That's great. So anyway, let's get started. So I have some slides that I used from last year's OSMC because it's a great summary on what Icinga for Windows is and how it works. And then we will do a deep dive into how it actually works. So let's start with Icinga for Windows 1.12. We released this year. What we made clear with that is that we want to improve Icinga for Windows, especially when it comes to automation. So we did a lot of changes on how certificates are handled with Icinga for Windows, but also added some parts of it that allows you to automate Icinga for Windows by using WinRM or SSH, for example, to deploy your configuration, because no one wants to log in on a Windows machine and then runs an automated script or something like that. So you want to automate it, and that's why we did various improvements there. We're not quite ready yet to support 100%, but it was a big leap to ensure that it's actually working. Now let's summarize Icinga for Windows, what it actually is. Basically, it's a monitoring solution that will check all or most of your Windows environment or Microsoft applications or certain other apps by fully using PowerShell. And you can extend those by using custom modules to write your own plugins, your own integrations. Now, for the plugins we provide, we have the basic Windows plugins, which include, for example, CPU load, memory, disks, and everything related. We have some basic MS SQL plugins. The same goes for Hyper-V and also for cluster monitoring when you have cluster services installed. All of these are different PowerShell modules that will ship as own individual module. Now for the architecture, and that's something that really changed over the years a bit, and I will go into that into the deep dive later on. So you have your Icinga master environment, and you have the PowerShell framework, which is the core component for managing the entire Icinga for Windows infrastructure. Now, you use the framework, and you install the Icinga agent with this. Now, the benefit of that is that with the framework installation, you can make sure that the agent is configured with all the required endpoints, naming, and so on. So you don't have to enable certain Icinga features or write a zones conf or anything related. Now we receive the configuration from the Icinga master. The Icinga agent logs everything in the event log, and the master tells the agent to execute a simple check. Now what happens is that the agent will call the PowerShell will load the framework, and then it will execute your plugin, for example, your CPU usage. Now, the issue with that is, if you have virtual machines with 2 cores, this will kill your environment because PowerShell is very resource hungry. And the issue with that is that we increased a lot, or made a lot of changes to Icinga for Windows to actually increase the performance. Now, what happened was that we created the PowerShell service binary, which will run the PowerShell in the background with the Icinga for Windows framework loaded. And this service will allow you to register endpoints for or other modules, like our REST API. Now what happens is that you can change the plugin execution from the PowerShell loading the entire framework, and then it calls the plugin on the local shell, to actually that the PowerShell will call the REST API. And the REST API will then internally execute all the PowerShell checks and report the result back as JSON, which means that the initial offload or the initial load is way lower because you don't need to load everything into memory and every time. Now, the PowerShell service is mandatory because you can't simply register the PowerShell to run a service. So we create a C# binary that is also installed and configured entirely by Icinga for Windows, so you don't need to do it manually. And it will simply run in the background. You have a PowerShell instance running, and this PowerShell instance will load all the modules required for Icinga for Windows. Now, what you can do now is that when we moved forward is that the performance was better, but we still had an issue because if you execute plenty of checks, then you still have to load each time a PowerShell. The PowerShell has to load itself, and then you do a REST call to the API. Now, what you could do was to use a PowerShell connector, which was a simple Go binary that will replace the PowerShell binary for the Icinga call. But the Icinga for Windows template you're using is then simply replacing the PowerShell exe with the PowerShell connector, and the entire Icinga for Windows PowerShell call is translated into a simple curl that is then run to the REST API. Now that's great, works very, very well and very, very fast. But since last year, we have a new feature. And that is that you entirely place the external call the Icinga agent does with a direct call from the Icinga agent to the Icinga for Windows API. So that means the Icinga agent will simply do an internal curl to the REST API, execute a check, and receive the result without a secondary binary loading, which is also a great way to ensure that no one is ever DDoSing your environment, because, as you might know, if you do check now on Icinga Web, and you do it many, many, many times, it will execute the plugin every single time. So if you do it 100 times, it would start 100 PowerShell instances and execute the checks. With this, it will internally schedule the curl, and the REST API is by default limited to 5 requests, which means you get 5 requests, and then the REST API, the Icinga agent connector, will simply wait until either there's a timeout or there's a slot available. So that also improves the actual performance when you do mass checkouts of a user. That's, I want to check it now. Who does that, by the way? Who clicks on check now all the time? Okay, maybe that's for you as well. So anyway, that's the recommended architecture for Icinga for Windows. So you have the agent installed, you have the framework, all your plugins, the REST API enabled, and use the Icinga agent to communicate directly with Icinga for Windows. What you need for that is Icinga 2.14 or later. So the master needs to be 2.14, the agents need to be 2.14 or later. Icinga for Windows 1.11 is required. And in case you're using the Icinga director, which is not mandatory for that, you will require Icinga for director 1.11 enabled as well. Now, when you talk about Icinga for Windows, what actually belongs to Icinga for Windows? It's the framework itself. That's a simple PowerShell framework that will combine all management tools, all installation routines, and everything related to allowing you to manage Icinga for Windows. We have the basic Windows plugins, Hyper-V, MS SQL, and the cluster plugins. And this is what's required to check your environment. Then we have the C# service binary. We have our Kickstarter that will allow you to easily manage and install Icinga for Windows on an entirely new device from scratch. And by the way, if you have questions, as this is a workshop, you can ask questions during the talk. We have the repository, and the repository is simply a JSON index file that will tell you where are your Icinga for Windows components. And you can access them and install based on this JSON file new components, or update your environment, or ship your own custom plugins or tools you want to use. All in the Icinga for Windows context, of course. So, and if you have a custom PowerShell script, for example, that wouldn't work. But if you create a Icinga for Windows module out of your custom plugins, then you can do that. And we have the Icinga agent. And that is Icinga for Windows in the basic handling with all these components. Now, the biggest issue is that I often have when I talk about Icinga for Windows is that I would like to introduce a new terminology on how Icinga for Windows is called, because I think it would be better to have an Icinga for Windows endpoint which actually consists of all the components that we actually require to monitor our system. So this would be your target Windows machine you would use to check your environment, your CPU load, your services, your disks, and so on. On the other hand, I would like to have the Icinga for Windows Manager, which simply consists of what? Any ideas? Yeah, but what is it part of? Exactly. So basically what you need to manage Icinga for Windows is just the framework. So the basic idea is that you have a local Windows machine, for example, as a server or your local machine. You install the Icinga for Windows framework, and you use this installation of Icinga for Windows to create all your configuration templates and everything you require. Later this year with Icinga for Windows 2, which I come to the end, is that we would love to introduce more ways help you automate your environment by using SSH and WinRAM, if they are present, because many customers are using WinRAM actually. Not as much as I want, but it's a good step in the right way. And that's basically what we need. To manage Icinga for Windows, you just need the framework. For everything else, for monitoring, you need the above, but of course, just the plugins that you require on this machine. Now, enough of the talk. Let's do some hands-on. Who has prepared a laptop with a Windows virtual machine? Okay, a few. That's great. So, I dare you to follow along and do some things. I'm serious. So, at first, how do we get started? I have a Windows 11 machine here, so let's do it on Windows 11. That's fine. And on this machine, there's nothing installed. No Icinga is installed, no Icinga for Windows, nothing is there. And the first step you need to do to actually get Icinga for Windows running. Hello? That's weird. Wait. The mouse was offset. That's weird. So let's see. Now that looks better. So the first thing you do is, when you have no idea how to install Icinga for Windows, is you go on icinga.com. You click on Resources. Then we have the documentation. And if you scroll down a little, you will have the Icinga for Windows docs. And here's everything summarized, what Icinga for Windows does, how it works, the architecture, and all the supported operating systems, for example. So our goal is, with Icinga for Windows, to support as many operating systems as possible. So in theory, we also support 2008 or 2, but the support is a little limited to that because some PowerShell implementations are not there. So you can try to run it. It should work in most cases, and if it's not, simply reach out to us in case we have a way to make it work, and we can do. But all right now supported operating systems from Microsoft are also supported. Now, when we click on installation, we have the Getting Started section, and it tells you that you at least need PowerShell 4, which means every native PowerShell installation that ships with Windows is supported. You have to make sure your execution policies are either set that you are able to execute modules and PowerShell script, or use some ways to modify it. You need either access to packages Icinga.com from the Windows machine, or have one centralized server you can clone your repository into later on. But that we will do on the during the steps. Now, we created a basic installation script that simply downloads the Icinga for Windows installer file. And the Icinga for Windows installer file is also directly available on packages Icinga.com. Yeah, thank you. And basically, that's a simple PowerShell script. You have the opportunity to add some flags to it. They are also documented. Wait, they are also documented down here. So all the arguments you can set are defined. So you can use this installer script, this initial small script, to actually tell Icinga for Windows to install itself in a specific module directory. By default, it would be under C program files. You can add an answer file or an installation command that will then do the entire configuration of Icinga for Windows for you. Or you can simply skip the wizard and simply plainly install Icinga for Windows. And you can also add the Icinga repository on where the initial files are loaded. So there's quite a lot of confusion with that, because if you use the Icinga repository flag on the initial installer, this will not change on how Icinga for Windows later on will look up repositories, because it will still default to packages Icinga.com. So you have to also make sure it's present in your installation later on. But anyway, that's the script. It will simply have a look on the framework, on the Kickstarter, and it will then download the components, run them, and do all the installation. And how that works, I can do simply copy and paste. There's no button for that. I copy that. And what I need to do, I need to open an administrative terminal or an administrative PowerShell. Can you see it? All right. And now we simply paste the script down here. And now we can run the script file. And now it tells us cannot be loaded because running scripts is not allowed on the system, because I have to check my execution policy. And that's restricted right now. So I can move along and go with set execution policy. For example, do it, of course, to something your environment does allow. I will simply do unrestricted now. And I can also set execution policy, scope, local machine, unrestricted. So that means now I can execute everything. And if I go now and run the script file, it will run. And it will tell me, all right, so basically, where do you want to install Icinga for Windows into? There's three options. I can use it in my user profile, so only my user has access to all the module files. I can use it installing the program files. That's the recommended way. That's also the default. And I could use it under in the Windows System 32. Please don't use that. Because that's just for Microsoft to install modules into. I would highly recommend to install always under program files. Because Icinga for Windows also has a built-in security policy that will prevent it from loading modules that are located in different scopes. So for example, if you install a PowerShell module in the System 32 folder, in an Icinga for Windows module System 32 folder, Icinga for Windows will not load it, because it's not inside the default Icinga for Windows framework installation. Yeah? I don't know of one. I just added it because I was advised to do it for some reasons, but I would never recommend it. Also, Microsoft recommends to not install modules into System 32. I'm not sure if anyone knows if there is a special case, because I was just asked to add the option to install it there to make it selectable, but I don't see a use case. But if you know, please let me know, because I don't see a reason. Huh? No, he just said it would be great to have the option, because it's a default system root for the PowerShell, like the user folder, because all of those three are default. And he said, add them. All right, let's add them. But as you see, the default is 1, so I would always go with that. So if I hit enter, it will download the Icinga PowerShell framework, install it. And now, on this machine, we would have our Icinga for Windows Manager already ready, because now we can actually do stuff with Icinga for Windows, but maybe we don't need this environment to monitor. And as you can see, what Icinga for Windows does is that starting with 1.8, we added the capability for migration tasks. So whenever we do changes, which, for example, are breaking changes, we will have a look on your Icinga for Windows installation and then do some cleanup tasks, change settings, change values to fit the new version of Icinga for Windows. So even when you have Icinga for Windows 1.8 installed and you go all the way to 1.12.3 now, by the way, I'm very glad that for all the releases, 1.12.1, 1.12.2, and 1.12.3 was skipped from Bernd's presentation because they all happened in 4 weeks. So if you have 1.7 installed and you install all the way back to 1.12.3, then all migrations will happening and your environment should work just fine. And as you can also see, we have the renew certificate scheduled task now present. So that means we have an issue, or we had two issues with the certificate handling of Icinga for Windows. One, the certificates didn't renew. So if your agent certificate was due for renewal, the agent renewed it, Icinga for Windows logged, hey, your certificate is no longer valid. That's fixed with 1.12. And also, we added the capability that when you use, for example, environments on a Citrix environment, for example, where you don't have a local user really to create the new certificates or the Icinga for Windows certificate from the Icinga agent, the scheduled task will now handle it because we'll offload it to a system process in the scheduled task and do all the actions there. So regardless if you use SSH, WinRM, or if you have a Citrix environment, you can always create the Icinga for Windows certificate without issues with the certutil binary that some scopes or some cryptographic keys are not present. Now, as the framework is installed, we are asked if we want to run the management console. And we can do so. And then it will load the Icinga for Windows text UI. And this UI is quite cool, in my opinion, because you don't need to know anything about Icinga for Windows, at least not much. What a question? Because what happens is that most of the key actions you can do are actually present inside the management console. And I hope it loads. Maybe? Hello? Hello? Okay, take some time. Good. So, that's how you're greeted. Now you have certain options. The highlighted ones are always the default option, which is also listed down here. And you can, for example, have a look now on Icinga for Windows. We had 3 overview. And let's have a look on what is installed for Icinga. I'm not sure if this VM has a resource issue. I hope not. It shouldn't be that slow. So, and this is basically when you have questions regarding Icinga for Windows, regardless if you have a GitHub issue, for example, you want to open, or if you have a community post you want to do. This is very helpful information because it will give us the opportunity to see where is your root installation file, what kind of services are, or default service users are configured. You see have the idea for, are you running a JR profile? And we come into JR later because it's a very cool topic. You see also, for example, if the Icinga for Windows certificate is installed, you have some documentation regarding the metrics over time collection. So if you want to do an average of CPU load for 1 hour, Icinga for Windows has a built-in daemon to do so, and also the installed Icinga for Windows component, also telling you if there's a new version available you can update to. Now, when I go back, for example, we have the component manager, and basically what you can do is you can install components manually if you want to do so by using the interface. There are no packages found. That's great. Because that's a fresh installation. Let's hit to settings. We go to repositories 3, and then we can set the Icinga stable repository, which results to packages Icinga.com. We can do it that way if you want to use it just as a management framework, for example, to see what kind of packages are there. But we can also do it entirely with the installation. So that's just on how you navigate this toolset. You can also enable, for example, certain repositories. Not sure why this is not working. Yes. Because it's already enabled. So I can enable them, I can disable and I can remove repositories. I can also change the way the order of repositories work. So if you have 5 repositories, for example, you can change the order on the repositories on which the components are fetched. And so, for example, if you have the agent with 112 and the very bottom installation, you have 110, everything in 4 top repositories, it will still install 112. It just takes longer because it has to fetch all the repositories down. Now, anyway, if you go back to the main menu with M, I can go to the component manager now. And I could, for example, hit install. And now there should hopefully be a list of components we can install. And here you see all the plugins or components that are present in the Icinga stable repository. And please don't ever install the REST API or the RPchecks feature. These are just there for backwards compatibility for very, very old installations. They will be removed later on because the REST API and the API checks are already part of the Icinga for Windows framework. So they're no longer required for new installations. Now, I could now use this and install everything manually, but that's not really fun, and also it's not great for automation because you don't want to use that on every of your hundreds of Windows machines. But what you want to is, what the basic approach actually is to generate a configuration. Now, when you hit 0 with base installation, we get asked if you want a new configuration or continue configuration. I hit it once before, so that's why it's here. So let's do new configuration. And then you will have 4 options. And those 4 options are you connecting from this system? So is the agent connecting to the Icinga master or satellite? Is the connection coming from the parent node? Is it bidirectional? Or use the Icinga Director Self-Service API, which is the easiest way to do the installation, because the Icinga Director, you can manage everything, regardless if your host is in a certain Icinga zone. The Icinga Director knows that, and it will ship the correct configuration to Icinga for Windows. This, however, only works if the Windows machine is able to talk to the Icinga Director. If you're not to, then this will not work yet. But with, like I said before, with the entire integration of WinRM and SSH, we actually want to make this possible from the manager endpoint node to play a sort of relay in that regard. So anyway, what we can do, we do it manually this time. We connect from both systems. And now it gives me the option to set my host name. By default, it will use the FQDN with lowercase, so you have your full qualified domain at the end. You can also, for example, do only the host name if you don't want the domain, or you set a custom host name, set it to anything you want, and then you can override it with a variable later on during your installation, for example, when you call your installation scripts. So let's do the lowercase FQDN. And then it tells me what a parent zone is. Now, let's assume you have no idea what a parent zone is. You can simply press H, and it will give you an explanation of what it is in the Icinga context. And the help part works in the entire wizard. So if you have no idea what a certain action does or what you're supposed to input, press H, and you have the help file that gives you an idea on what should be added there. Now, my zone is the master. And now I need to add the endpoint names to that. And as you can see, we are limited to 2 entries because inside an Icinga zone, you can only have 2 endpoints. I can press H again, and it will tell me these are the object names for your parent Icinga endpoints as defined with the zone conf. If you're running multiple Icinga instances with the same zone, you're required to add both of them. So I will do so. Salesnet Icinga 2A, that's node 1. And the second one is Salesnet Icinga 2B. Very creative. And you simply add a name, you press enter, and then it will add both names there. Now, when I press enter, it will now try to do a DNS lookup, and the DNS lookup works. So it takes the name, tries to resolve it over DNS to fetch the IP address for these endpoints. Because I think, not sure, some people trust DNS. I personally don't trust DNS because when DNS fails, your monitoring fails. I don't want to do that. So it's best to have the IP address configured in your zones conf. But you don't need to worry about that because if the Windows machine is able to resolve the DNS entry, you have, like here, parent address for 2A is 111.20 and 111.21 is the 2B node. And that's all done automatically. If there's, for some reason, there's no way to resolve the DNS, it will ask you to enter IP address for this node, which then could also be, of course, the FQDN if you want to. I personally do not recommend it, but that's up to you if you trust your DNS. And basically, that's it. That's a basic configuration for Icinga for Windows. We have connecting from both systems. We have the FQDN set. We have our parent zone, our nodes, and the IP address. And if I hit Enter now, I can, for example, print the installation command. And the installation command is install -Icinga -install command. And then you have a JSON object. And this JSON object contains all the configuration for Icinga for Windows that you have just described. And you can run this JSON script on all your Icinga for, or all your Windows machines to basically configure Icinga for Windows to simply run with the FQDN, with connecting both ways, which will also open the Windows firewall, and configuring your Icinga agent with all zones and endpoint configurations. When we look back at the install script, you see that we have the install command flag right here. So what you can also simply do is when you run this script above, you can simply add -install command and add the same JSON directly to the script. So you have in one run, you can do your entire configuration with that. And that makes it very easy because you can do a basic script, do all the configuration, all the installation, and use your deployment method or use group policies to install Icinga for Windows simply by that. And you have the same configuration everywhere. Now, let's assume you're an expert, and of course you are, and you want to do some more stuff with Icinga for Windows. We have the Advanced tab here, which if I hit A, I get every single configuration possible within the Icinga for Windows Management Console that's currently added. Now, what I can do, for example, is I can change the default port for the Icinga agent. That's not 565 or something else. By default, as we said, we want to do both directions. The Icinga for Windows will add a Windows firewall rule to allow communication to port 5665, because otherwise the master wouldn't be able to connect there. We can enforce the certificate creation. So for example, if you have some issues with Icinga certificates, sometimes it can happen. You can simply tell them, okay, do the entire configuration again, enforce the certificate generation. It will throw away all the certificates and go from you. We have the default global templates, Icinga director and global templates, which are deployed. You can also add custom zones. So for example, if you have a zone called Windows zone in your environment, you can simply add, wait, that's wrong, Windows zone. And now we'll add the Windows zone directly to the configuration. And that's great because, for example, if you have multiple zones, you can add as many as you want because there's no limit right now. If you have 5 different zones, you can add all these 5 zones here. And now as we made a change, let's go back to our installation command. And as you can see, we have custom zones now with the values Windows zones. Everything that is not, so all values Icinga for Windows assumes we use the default. Once you change this default value, it will be listed here. And based on that, you can also do, for example, not run everything through the IMC later on, but if you want to add a new zone, you simply extend the JSON array for your environments. And you can also do this programmatically if you want to, depending on your satellite zone or DMZ zone you're currently working on. But let's have a look. What have we else? We have the agent version called release. That means it takes the latest version that is inside our repositories. We want to install the Icinga agent. We install it in this location. This is the default user we are assigning it because that's the Icinga default user network service. We want to install plugins. The Icinga for Windows service is installed. The location on where the framework service or the Icinga for Windows service is installed to. We have our stable repository. We do not install JA yet. We could do so, but we do not. We have our certificate authority server, which is basically the first one on the list. If you use the Icinga director, it will know which one it is. So basically, it tells you returns always the right. We want to install the API check feature. We enable the automatic service recovery. So in case the Icinga for Windows or the Icinga agent service dies, it will simply restart the agent. It will restart Icinga for Windows in case there's an issue. And for Icinga Director Self-Service config, if you use the Icinga Director Self-Service, there is an option here that allows you to change some handlings. It's documented partly in that here. Basically, I now have 2 users who are modifying this part. It just tells the Icinga director how the host address works. So if you, for example, use the host address or the FQDN, for example, and you can also add the display name by doing so, because most people don't want to use the display name because it comes from a different location. Yeah? Sorry? Yes. Okay, that's great. So, what do you do at the display name? Uh-huh. Ah. Okay. That's great. Interesting. We need to talk more about it. So anyway, you can modify how this works. So you can set the display name directly when you register the host with an Icinga director later on. If we have time later on, we can do a run with the Icinga director because I think it's quite cool. But use with care, because if you do something wrong here, then the registration might work, but some parts are missing. And you cannot do everything, because I had a ton of discussions with Tom regarding on how to make this secure, and we both agreed on we only let the address and the display name be configured by this method, because otherwise, because there was an idea like, do we make it, for example, you can add a custom variable to tell exactly which operating system it is. And I was like, yeah, but if we do that, then you could also do that, and maybe you can hijack Icinga with that to deploy certain configuration you don't want to. And there's so much security pinpoints that were like, okay, display name, address, that's it. We don't do anything else. And that's it. That's what you can do with the configuration. Now, we can export this as an answer file as well. So if you prefer use files, you can export it, and then you have the same JSON, so the installation command and the answer file are identical. It's all JSON. It's just the one is inline and the other is formatted like in a proper text document. Now anyway, let's start the installation and see what happens. Now, based on the configuration we have right now, it will download the agent, it will install the agent, and do all the configuration tasks now for this specific machine. This might take a while. And every single step Icinga for Windows does is also listed here later on. You see, for example, you have some tests here. So Icinga for Windows has built-in test utilities to tell you actually if Icinga for Windows is working, if a service user has access to directories. So most issues, especially with Icinga, often come from the part that you can't start the Icinga agent service. You don't know why, and it's simply because the user running the service has no permission to the Icinga directories. So there's no permission to do that. And that's what we try to catch here to make sure that everything's handling. We have our certificate right now because we are able to talk with our Icinga master. It will configure everything. It will also, by default, register the service check daemon. So the service check daemon is the one that collects the metrics over time. I talked prior. But it's just a daemon. It's not an actual service check right now it will do. We see, OK, it enables the firewall. It makes sure that all directories, again, are available. So it runs some sort of test in different steps to ensure that the installation is working properly. And once we are done, we hopefully should have a working environment. And while we wait, I hope this works. That's great. No, that's wrong. That one I need. So, OK, that takes a while. So while we wait, what we can do now is that we need to add our host inside our Icinga because we use it manually. So what I simply do, click on hosts. Can you see it, or is it too small? Better? All right. So now let's add a host. We choose a template. I have my generic agent template. I give it a host name. And now that's important because the host name needs to match the one we selected with our host name selector. So we said lowercase fqdn, which means we need to add the full fqdn in lowercase, which in my case, as this is just a demo VM, it's not part of the of my demo Active Directory. I have we as presenter. I can add a display name, and I could add a host address. I think that one should work. It should be resolvable, hopefully. And that's it. Now I click on Add, and I have my Windows machine. What I can also do is, because it's a working, I have my operating system list, and I go with Windows 11 Pro. We don't have anything else installed, and I click on Store. Now, I click Deploy. And now basically, because the entire configuration already is done by Icinga for Windows with the entire certificate handling, this is the last step, because now the host is added, I hopefully should receive my host, and hopefully I should be able to do a check now, and it should print a result. That's already done. hopefully. So, okay, installation is done, so it jumps back to the main menu once everything is done. In case there is some sort of warning or error during the installation, it's printed down here. Right now, there is sadly no way to have a look on the log later on, but the next Icinga for Windows version, 1.13, will have the installation log printed directly in the Icinga event log, Icinga for Windows event log. And it will also be stored locally in a last installation summary to make it possible to have a look on it or to collect it and transmit it to somewhere to review it in case something went wrong. Now, let's have a look. This should work. It should. But it doesn't. Why? Output unavailable. That's great. Okay, so at first what we can do now is wait for and go to the Icinga shell. So that's basically a fancy way to display the PowerShell because there's the Icinga prompt beforehand. Users sometimes get confused but I'm not inside an Icinga shell. How does it work? It's just a fancy rewrite of the main prompt just to make so it looks cool. It's no real benefit. It's quite slow. So let me have a look. The configuration is, yes, accepts config. Yes, this should work. Hello? I'm trying to check that. Wait, let me have a look. Let's see. Huh, you're right. My bad. Yeah. But why? Yeah. Yes. That's the problem. I barely use this method. I always use the Icinga director method. So the Icinga director will do everything we did right now, but also handle the certificate handling. Thanks for the input. Yeah, I forgot about that. So what happens if you use this method now is that Icinga is installed, the agent is installed, everything is configured, and the certificate is ready on the agent. It just needs to be signed. And if I log into the master, I type Icinga to CA list. I get the certificate fingerprint. I can copy that now. Icinga to sign. And then I sign the certificate for this. Yeah. Yeah. And now the certificate is signed. Now it will be transmitted to the Icinga agent. The agent will start itself. And then it should work this time. So, what we can do here is we can run test Icinga for Windows, which is a new command introduced with 1.12. And test Icinga for Windows will collect all system metrics for Icinga for Windows and put them through some tests. So if the agent is installed, if the user is properly configured, if the permissions are set, and it will also test the REST API and the certificates of the Icinga agent. While this is running, let's have a look on our checks now, because now they should report that something is working. And as we see, we have an unknown. Certificate validation failed. So that's great, because that means our check execution actually works. So what happens now is if we go to the bias check, because that one is that simple, it will tell us the certificate failed because it's self-signed certificate. Now, what happens is when you use this method to run the Icinga for Windows installation, that the Icinga agent will receive the new certificate signed by the Icinga master, but during the installation, the Icinga for Windows certificate was created. But the creation was done with the self-signed certificate, not signed by the master yet. Now, the thing is, this issue that we have right now will resolve itself at 1 a.m. in the morning, because then the scheduled task will run and renew the certificate automatically, check if the agent has a new certificate. It will update it, and the Icinga for Windows API will check every 10 minutes if there is a new certificate and load it directly. So in case you have this issue, it will automatically go away at 1 a.m., which of course nobody wants to wait for that. But that's one way to resolve it. And the other is that we receive here the issue, the Icinga seems not be signed, recreating certificate might resolve the issue. And now what we can do is, as you can see, the REST API is actually working. It's just that it's running with a self-signed certificate now, and the Icinga agent will authenticate with the agent certificate to the API. So if they don't match, the Icinga agent, for security reasons, obviously, will not communicate with that. Now what we can do, renew cert, no, sorry. Let's have a look. Get command, renew cert, wait. So get a list of all commands that are available inside Icinga for Windows. And we see here, start Icinga for Windows, schedule task, renew certificate. A very long name. But with this command, you can run, for example, by using your group policies or a Windows remote management or SSH, connect to this machine, run this command, and it will renew the certificate, regardless of your user context you're currently running on. Of course, you need some administrative privileges to run it, but it doesn't matter on if the user is the Citrix user or whatsoever, because it will just run the certificate renewal task. Now the task will start. And you should use that one because it's way simpler and covers every single use case for the installation. And if I run the test Icinga for Windows command again, it will tell us that Icinga for Windows certificate is now properly configured. And I hope I talked enough to catch the 10-minute mark, because then within the next steps, it will automatically renew the certificate and the API will just work. So with this way, or in general, the new way we approach this, in case the Icinga agent certificate is due for renewal, it will be renewed by the master. Icinga for Windows will create a certificate at 1 a.m. automatically, and then the API will load it. So there shouldn't be no way that your Icinga for Windows API will run out of a valid certificate if you use the Icinga certificates for the agents. I'm not sure why this machine is so slow, but that should be faster. So just for comparison, that's a local machine on my system. Okay, it will crash, because I'm not an administrator. Hello? Maybe not. Windows doesn't like me today. So anyway, we have our installation. And we simply get a warning now. Icinga for Windows is configured without a JA profile. So that's a warning. It's not a critical, because we highly recommend using JA. Who has no idea what JA is? OK, that's a lot. OK, who of those are Windows admins? OK, a few. So I will get into JA later on, because it's a very important topic to make sense. So I'm not sure. How long do I have? 30 minutes, right? OK. you see the test, everything passed now, so in general our configuration is valid. Now the only thing that this test doesn't cover right now is if the current certificate and the Icinga agent certificate are actually renewed. That's something I still need to work on. But if I'm lucky, then this check does work now, and it does. So I just called the task, the certificate is renewed, the API gets the new certificate, and then the check simply works. Now, this is the easiest way to manage Icinga for Windows, and the best part about that is that you can automate everything by using group policies as well. So if you have group policies, you can simply register one-time scheduled tasks, run your installation script, and deploy everything from there. You can also even update your entire environment, because what you can do is when you want to install a new component. Let's, for example, have a look at show minus Icinga. That's the one in the management console where it gives us an overview. The simple command for that is show minus Icinga. It will collect again all the system environment information, and then we can see which components are actually installed on the system already, and also if the Icinga for Windows certificate is installed, and the service PID should be there. So we have here Icinga agent 2.14.2, available 2.14.2, so that means there is no update pending. We have our Icinga for Windows certificate that is signed by our Icinga certificate authority, which is also fine. We have our Icinga for Windows service PID. So that's the service currently Icinga for Windows is running with. So it's 16.4.4. Let's have a look on the task manager. And we have 16.4.4. That is our PowerShell task here. And that is the one that is currently running all the API commands. And a great advantage with, I think it was 1.11 or 1.12, the memory leak is gone. We fixed the memory leak. So it should be around 300 megabytes around when all libraries and components are loaded. So we have our installation summary here. And now let's, for example, say you want to install the MS SQL plugins. You can do everything with the CLI. For example, search Icinga. Nee, not search. Find. Isn't that search? I'm not sure now. Wait, what? You know, it's a great sign when even the developer can't remember the commands. Huh? Update, register, read, push, pop. Search, yeah. Search. Icinga. Okay, whatsoever. So for example, I see now, when I look on MS SQL, I get a list of all MS SQL plugins that are found within our repository. And for example, I can now install them by using install Icinga component, name MS SQL, and I can also add a version. There's a delay. Let's, for example, install 1.4.0. It prompts me if I want to install it, but I can also do confirm. Then there's no confirmation. It will install the MS SQL plugins in version 1.4 now. So you can go back and forth. The only thing you should be careful of is going back and forth with the framework, because you have a new version of the framework with the applied schema migrations or pending migration task. You install a previous version. There could be some problems because we do not downgrade the migrations. Just be aware of that. So if I do show Icinga again, what I can do see now is that the MS SQL plugin component is installed, but it will be flagged as updatable because we have a new version available. Version 1.4, available 1.5. And I can simply run update Icinga, I can do confirm, which doesn't prompt me for a question. And if I do this, it will check all the Icinga for Windows components installed, compare them with the latest versions available inside your repositories, and then it will update them. And as you can see, some are skipped because the versions does either match or anything related. And now we have MS SQL plugins 1.5 installed, show Icinga, and we have the latest version. The same applies to the framework itself and to the Icinga agent. So you simply run update Icinga. I have customers, they have a scheduled task that runs sometimes in the morning during the downtimes. They run update minus Icinga and update automatically the entire Icinga infrastructure from the Windows machines, from the repositories. They simply add a new repository or a new version for plugins or custom components to the repository, and that's it. Yeah, and now we are up to date. All our checks should work just fine. And here we have all our checks configured now. Now, of course, these are all configured within my demo environment. But how do you get there? How do you get your checks inside the Icinga director, for example, now? What's great with Icinga for Windows is that each plugin collection will ship Icinga 2 configuration and Icinga director baskets with them. So if you go to PowerShell plugins, for example, you can also download them from GitHub then. It's also possible. You have the config part, and there's 3 directories: director, Grafana, and Icinga. If you go to the director, we have lots of JSON files inside, which is the entire plugin collection, or in the plugin bundle JSON is the entire collection of all plugins available in this package. And they are also, with every single new version, they're also updated. So you can download them directly from the release from GitHub, for example. We also have plain Icinga configuration files. So let's, for example, have a check on the TCP check here. Open with Visual Studio Code. And then you have your base or your check command object for invoke Icinga check TCP with every, thank you, with every single argument the plugin provides, including the help, including data type awareness, everything that you set within the function for this TCP call. Let's make it a bit bigger. Is present here. So, for example, if you have that's a string value, for example. It will automatically escape properly the string value. If you have, so you don't need to add single quotes. If you have a space in between, there's a DSL function here that is automatically rendered if it detects it's a string object. So it automatically adds the DSL function through that. And that's quite interesting because that makes writing your own plugins also a lot easier. And to do so, I will show it to just how easy that is. So let's get started. New Icinga for Windows component. Give it a name, and we call it Icinga Summit. We can add a lot of author, company name, and so on. And we can say open in editor. Now it takes the default editor, which is hopefully Visual Studio Code and not the ISE. And now we've created a C program files, Windows PowerShell modules, Icinga PowerShell, Icinga Summit. Now we've created a new Icinga for Windows component. And what I can do now is go into that. We have our manifest file, which tells us what's loaded. Now, I didn't add everything here, so that's why it's missing. We can also add it later on again. We have our basic module file, which adds an import file to that. So just don't touch that, leave that alone, leave it as it is, because that will tell Icinga for Windows that it can load this component, so it's automatically present inside the environment. And then we have some files here, but not really much. So that's basically a base skeleton now for Icinga for Windows. Now what we can do is we can start writing our own plugins. We have a basic documentation here that tells us the type of ranges. By the way, who does not know the Nagios threshold guidelines or Icinga threshold guidelines? I mean, how you write the arguments to check if they're lower, higher, equal, in between, out between. Who does not know that? Okay, some. Yeah, so because I get a lot of questions when you have, for example, a service check. It's like, yeah, but it tells me this value is now critical, but it shouldn't be because it's lower than 0, but I only want values to be higher than 0 problem. Then you simply write it that way with tilde, Doppelpunkt, column, thank you, and 20, which means if it's greater than 20. If you do replace it with 0, which means greater than 0, and every negative number will be moved out of it. That's quite cool, and Icinga for Windows does support it with every single threshold argument by default. So also as developer, you don't need to take care of that because that just works. So I need to speed up a little. Anyway, let's create a new plugin. Create a new file, and we call it invoke Icinga check Icinga summit hello. And what? No permission? That's bad. No. That happens when there's not an elevated shell. No, it's an elevated shell. Ah. Anyway, let's do it again. Open folder. Ah, wait, there it is. So, Icinga Summit. Plugins, a new file. And does it work now? Why? Operation not permitted. Huh? That's interesting. Okay, let's do it differently. So let me move that out of there. Yes. So, not sure if this will work later on, but we'll see. When I open this in code now, I should be able to work with that. Just to give you an idea on how the configuration, everything works. So yes, I trust the author. Plugins, let's do it again. New file, invoke Icinga, check Icinga summit hello. Now, why do I call it that way? Thank you. So there's one guideline that is that every plugin Icinga for Windows is using needs to be inside this namespace, invoke minus Icinga check. What comes afterwards is entirely up to you. My recommendation is if your module is called Icinga Summit, for example, then add Icinga summit there. So for example, if you do a basic plugin or MS SQL plugin as MS SQL health, that's great. But if you add, for example, invoke Icinga check health, and another one adds invoke Icinga check health, you have 2 times the same function, which will cause a conflict. So always use proper namespacing to ensure that it's separatable from each other. And yeah, okay, let's do it, Copilot. That's not what I want, but would be an option. So what we have now is we have our function, invoke Icinga check Icinga summit hello. I can add some arguments here. And let's say, for example, hello. String message. Hello. And we can create a check object now. Now, there's an entire developer guide present on how to write actual plugins. Where it is. Hello. Yeah, right, here it is. And everything I just showed you is also listed down here in this developer guide. So you have how you handle checks and packages and everything related. I'm just running a little out of time. So let's do check new Icinga check, give it a name, hello message, and the value is, let's say, message. And we don't want to write path data. And now I can do return new Icinga check result, check compile. Now basically, that's now just on how a basic Icinga for Windows plugin can look like. You have a check object, you can add a value there. We can also, for example, give it a different name based on our variable we have up here. And now, let's make it more interesting. Int, because then it's easier to test it. Let's say the input value is 10 by default. Input value. And we add it here. And now you remember all these commands here. What's like lower, equal, higher, whatsoever. Now what you can do is with Icinga for Windows is $check 1 out of range, and then we add warning down here. And we can also add, of course, critical. And I can write it directly behind. Run. No, that's wrong. That's crit out of range critical. And behind that, I simply need to add a pipe, because to tell it that's the end. So I can do it, these check objects, I can add incremental functions because they will always return the same object back. So I can do one out of range and crit out of range, basically with my two variables, with my two arguments. And that's it. Now I have a functional Icinga plugin where I have a warning threshold, a critical threshold, an input value, and the message will simply change the name of the check object. Now, of course, what I need to do is I need to write a documentation. Icinga Summit demo. And then we have the parameter message. And we tell it, oh, come on. Let's say message changes the name of the check object. Then we have the input value, the value to be compared against thresholds. I make this quick. Warning, critical. So, basically it's a documentation. I can do an example now whatsoever. And what I could do, if it's now allowed inside Icinga for Windows context, I could simply run this command, which probably won't work now because it's not in the wrong file. Exactly, it's not recognized, so I need to move it back. So that's, by the way, the reason why it's great when you have a local development machine to deploy Icinga for Windows in your local user space. Sorry? Do you have a microphone? That's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, thank you. Yes, when you up with data types and then you do try to do it correctly, but you're fully right, that won't work. Yeah. So basically, when I say int, it will simply give me the numeric number, but the threshold won't work. So we have to remove that one. That's why Copilot is not always good. It gives great ideas, but I fully went with it. So simply leave it empty. That's the best way because then it's fine. And now I put it back. Down documents, Icinga Summit. I wish this machine was faster. Program files, Windows PowerShell, modules. And paste it here, continue. Okay, so what I can do now is Icinga shell to create a new Icinga shell instance. So it will load all modules and ensure that we can work on a fresh PowerShell. You can also do a no new instance, and will simply try to refresh the current instance. But as I changed the modules now, it's easier to do it that way. And hopefully, if I did everything right, we should now have a check plugin with the Icinga Summit handling. I just... So do you have questions so far? Did you understand everything? It goes both ways. Yeah. No, so basically what you can do is what the recommendation is for repositories. If you, for example, let's say, because that's also important right now, that's why I do it that way. let's, for example, assume this machine here right now is your mirror server. So I can create a folder Icinga on C, for example, right now. And what I can do is I can run sync Icinga repository, give it a name, for example, Icinga Summit. The path would be C Icinga I just created. I give a remote path, and the remote path is the one that is accessible from other machines. So, for example, if you have a web path, it would be / we as presenter / Icinga, for example. In this case, because it's locally, I can simply do Icinga as well to use it as remote path, and then I have a source. And that's HTTPS, packages, Icinga.com, Icinga for Windows, stable. And now what happens, it will sync the entire Icinga for Windows repository to this local machine. So every single file that is on the remote repository will be synced locally to this machine, and I can use this machine then, so this Windows machine, allowing other zones, for example, to fetch the components from there. So you can also use the entire proxy, DNS, DMZ zone handling, everything can contribute to that. And when I have a look in this folder now, it takes a while because it reviews the entire repository. I have every single file within here shortly. It takes a while because, so what happens is when you download these files, you have the stable repository, and you have a JSON here, and this JSON is the entire index, and everything that's inside this JSON file will be downloaded. And for example, for security reasons, there's also a file hash. So in case the file hash does not match the downloaded hash, it will simply throw an error. Until hashes do not match, I don't want to do anything. In addition to that, once the entire repository is synced, it will also do another check for the repository hash later on. So there's a double check, each file is checked, and then later on the entire file structure is checked to ensure that it's identical. Now it's here, and I have all my files synced to this machine. And what I can do now is, as we have the, hopefully this works now, Summit, let's see. We have our Icinga Summit component. Okay, install it, unblock, get child item. That's normally something that Icinga for Windows does, but I need to do manually now. Program files, Windows PowerShell, modules, Summit, unblock file, and now I can do this. Okay, so invoke Icinga check. Module Icinga PowerShell. Okay, does it work now? Invoke Icinga check. Yeah, that's great. Wait. Wait, I made a mistake. So, publish Icinga for oh, come on. Windows component, name Icinga Summit. That should work now. Okay. And now that one should work. Invoke Icinga check Icinga Summit hello. Now it works. So when you run publish Icinga for Windows component, you can give it a name, which is Icinga Summit, which is the name of the module. And what happened now is that when I publish this module, here we have it. We have, for example, a doc entry. It it will generate the documentation for this plugin based on the arguments that I have set. So we have the message, we have the warning, also with the default values. So that's the documentation. Now for the plugin, I didn't do much. I just have written the plugin with the arguments. And what I also did is, oh my God, I'm running out of time. And we have our Icinga configuration. Config, director, and here we have our Icinga Summit button, Summit bundle. And now I can go to the Icinga director. I go to configuration baskets, create, Icinga Summit, submit. Huh? Oh, so wait, upload. Icinga Summit, choose a file. Program files, Windows PowerShell, modules, Icinga Summit, config, director. Let's just do this check command now. Upload. I click on snapshots. I click on the snapshot. Now it tells me PowerShell execution policies, modify PowerShell base, and it creates invoke Icinga check summit hello, and I simply click on restore. Tell him to place it inside the Icinga director. And now I have the check command here. We have our values. No description for some reason. And the best part is if you have an array, for example, now, if you have a switch argument, it will automatically add a director array, for example, for dropdowns. It will add a yes-no flag if it's a Boolean, if it's a switch. And it's all inside. And that's how the plugin looks like. For somehow it didn't import the description. But that's basically it to import a command. Now I have 2 more minutes. I will hurry up, because I have one more topic, and that's JEA. And JEA stands for just enough administration. And basically, if you're, I assume everyone's familiar with Linux, you have sudo, for example. And sudo allows certain users to run a binary or something like that with administrative privileges. And the same goes for JEA. So you can create a JEA profile. In this JEA profile, you allow a certain user to have permissions, for example, to restart a service or to start a service, but not to stop a service. So that's something you can do with these profiles. You add PowerShell commands, which are allowed to be used by a non-privileged user. And you can simply enable this either through the IMC, initially telling him to install JEA, or you simply type install Icinga security, which will then install a local user Icinga on this machine. This user does not have any permission. It doesn't have WinRM permissions, no RDP permissions, no local login permissions. The only thing this user is allowed to do is to run as a service. And the Icinga agent, as well as the Icinga for Windows daemon, are set to run with this specific user. The password policy is quite simple. It's a 60-digit long password that's randomly generated, nowhere stored, and is reset every time you update the JEA profile. So there is no way to guess the password. There's no way to log in with this password. It's just during the setup of the JEA profile. And what happens now is that the Icinga for Windows library will now have a look on all Icinga for Windows components installed, check the PowerShell files, and then build a framework dependency list. So it tells, okay, these are all commands that are present in my Icinga for Windows environment. And now it checks all the Icinga for Windows plugins with the invoke minus Icinga check namespace and says, okay, you have the CPU plugin here. What type of PowerShell command does this invoke Icinga check CPU depend on? And then it will automatically build a dependency list for these plugins. And based on that, it will then simply create a JR profile because it knows, okay, the CPU plugin is, for example, fetches some basic Windows information with get minus VME object. Or the service plugin uses get minus service to fetch service information. And all these mandatory components or commandlets and functions are recursively added to this JR profile. And once the profile is installed, it will compile the JR profile catalog, and your JR profile is then ready to go. For example, why this is important, we should have the Windows update check, for example. Because the Windows update check is not possible because as a network user, you don't have permission to access the required COM object we use for checking if the permission is possible or not. I'm sorry, I'm overdue. I'm already done soon. Once this JR profile is finished, it will restart Icinga agent, it will restart Icinga for Windows, and afterwards the API is loaded with this JR profile, and if you run the update check, it will simply go through. So every single check or every single permission handling you normally do with WMI permissions, Hyper-V permissions, anything like that, all of that is resolved by using JR. Because you don't have to do fancy stuff. And the WinRM service is not configured. Yes, I need to want to restart it. And yes, I want to start it. Yeah, basically that. My time is failing. That's why I forgot about that one. But by default, WinRM is mostly not configured, so you can simply configure by WinRM quick config. I tried to do so. But next time I need 2 hours for my talks, or just an entire day. So WinRM quick config. And now if I do it again, then it works. That's basically it, how you do it. I think I'm done, because I took a lot of your time. Or do you have questions?
Yeah.
I think there was a question.
All very easy.
It is actually.
Easy peasy.
It is actually.
Yeah, thank you. Very easy. This local repository you showed before, can it be used also to deploy these custom plugins? So if I create new Icinga PowerShell modules, to redeploy them and release them for the infrastructure?
Yes. So basically, what you do is when you use the publish command that I did earlier, you can release package paths. And let's, for example, I put it in the Icinga directory. And what happens is it will create a zip package out of this Icinga Summit package now. And when I have a look on the file system, it should be here right now. I don't see it. Where is it? Wait. Create release package. Missed the argument. Now there should be the package here. Here it is. Icinga PowerShell Summit. Now you have the zip file created. And what you can do now is, because now you have the EFI repo JSON which is the repository file, what you can do now is new Icinga, or no, new Icinga repository, name Icinga Summit 2, pass Icinga. I leave the remote path empty. And we say, yeah. Now it will have a look on everything that's under C Icinga. It will generate the repository file, and this will now also include the Icinga Summit package. So that means if I, yeah, that will take forever. No idea what was this machine. So when you do search Icinga component, then in search for Icinga Summit, it will tell you that it found the component in this repository. But I'm not sure why this is so slow. But basically, with the developer tools, you can create new components, you can compile them with the release package, and then you simply add them to the Icinga repository, and then that's it. And then you can simply run install minus Icinga component, Icinga Summit on your remote machines, and it will install and manage the updates just like that.
I think with that we bring it to an end, because before the first people die from hunger.
I'm sorry.
Again, I would like to ask for an applause for Christian doing all that work. Thank you.